So welcome, everyone. Dare I say, animation is in the house up here on stage. I am so honored to be here with this group of amazing wave makers in animation. My name is Ramsey Naito. I'm Japanese American. I was born in New York, raised in Baltimore, Maryland. I currently am president of Paramount and Nickelodeon Animation, where I oversee animated series and animated movies, including theatrical films. And I'm your moderator today. And so I'm going to throw the mic to Domee, actually, first to introduce herself, and we're going to go straight down the line.
I'm Domee Shi. I'm the director of Pixar's Turning Red. I'm also a creative VP at the company. And I'm Chinese-Canadian. The movie Turning Red is set in Toronto, Canada. It's semi-autobiographical. I do not turn into a giant red panda. And I love animation and these ladies. Ooh, okay.
I'm Jennifer Yuh Nelson, and
Insert mic.
I'm Jennifer.
Is it working?
Testing.
You can use mine.
Yeah.
Can you hear me now? I'm Jennifer Yuh Nelson. I directed Kung Fu Panda 2 and 3, and now I'm supervising Love, Death, and Robots, which is on Netflix. And I'm Korean American, raised in Los Angeles from a family of artists.
I'm Adele Lim. I was primarily a television writer for a long time, and then I got into features, Crazy Rich Asians, before writing the screenplay for Raya and The Last Dragon with Disney. I just directed my first movie for Lionsgate late last year that's coming out, which is not appropriate for any children or your parents, but please listen.
Hi, I'm Janet. Oh, yes. I'm Janet Wu. I am a director in content at Netflix. I am Chinese American, though I was born in Canada. Woo! Edmonton, Canada, and then we kind of grew up all over the States. I spent the first half of my career in live action, and then went over to Disney feature animation, and then have been at Netflix for about 4.5 years. Excited to be here.
Amazing. So my first question is an icebreaker question. What were you supposed to be when you were little? And who inspired you to be who you are today? And let's start with Janet. Let's start with you.
All right. What was I supposed to be? Well, let's see. I really love dolphins, so I wanted to be a dolphin trainer or marine biologist. Actually, my mom sent me an essay I wrote when I was a kid recently, and it said, I would love to discover all the secrets of the ocean when I grow up. So there's that. Inspiration-wise, I have to say, my parents were, I'm second generation. They came from China, went through the Cultural Revolution, and my mom was an English major, actually, similar to myself. My dad was a scientist, and they both really supported my kind of crazy creative inclinations. And so, I think probably they inspired me just by being really supportive.
I forgot to introduce myself ethnically. So I'm Chinese Malaysian, and I came here when I was 19. So when I was growing up, my Chinese parents in Malaysia, I was always a writer and said I wanted to be a writer, and their first reaction was like, there is no money in that. You're going to be like a poor novelist and grow up in poverty. So I was supposed to work in advertising. And when I got to college over here for TV production, I met a cute boy who was like, after graduation, I'm going to drive out to LA to become a screenwriter and maybe write for the X-Files, which sounded like so much more fun than advertising. So I would say that, a white boy in Boston.
I think it's working now?
Yes.
I was actually wanting to be a lot of things when I was little. I actually wanted to be an airline pilot. And then my friends told me they would never fly in a plane with me flying it. And my eyes were bad. So my family are all artists. My mom is an artist, and she would draw for us. And my sisters were artists, and they were working in animation. So it made pretty much a lot of sense for me to be an artist. So I stopped fighting it, and I became an artist.
Wow. Wow. For me, my dad was an art professor back in China. And when we immigrated to Canada, it took him a long time to establish himself as an artist. So he didn't want me to go into art at all. So initially, I tried to like marry what my parents wanted for me, which is, a doctor with my love of drawing. And I was like, maybe medical illustrator. But then I sucked at biology, and blood and drawing organs made me really squeamish. And then I settled on animation because I love it. And then I, had this whole presentation for my parents when I pitched to them that I wanted to go to animation school. I was like, look, a Disney animator gets healthcare, 401k, all this stuff. And they're like, okay, we will allow it. And then in terms of who inspired me growing up, just a lot of really badass Asian female artists in the Japanese anime and manga space, Rumiko Takahashi, Naoko Takeuchi, who created Sailor Moon. In college, I idolized Jen for Kung Fu Panda, and I just remember like studying her storyboards for the action scenes and be like, oh my God, I can't believe a woman drew these. This is amazing. And like having people like her in the industry, like killing it, really inspired me and gave me hope. Yeah.
That's so cool. I'll jump in on this one too for myself. Oh, yeah. But when I was little, but like Jen, my family, they were all artists, and that's what I wanted to be, was an artist. So I wanted to be a shoe designer, but I also wanted to be a modern dancer. And to this day, my parents, they're still artists, and they actually cannot believe that I even have a job because they never had jobs. And so yeah. But and so I am going to ask you guys, given we're all here for animation, and you guys are all wave makers, what does it mean to you to be a wave maker in animation? And, what really drew you in? What inspired you to just go full force and be the leaders you are in our field?
I think when I was starting out in animation, there really weren't as many people that looked like us in the roles that we're in. And it was interesting because you're walking into a room and you're surrounded by people who look nothing like you, have none of the same backgrounds, and you're trying to find ways of sort of finding a place for yourself, finding a place for your unique way of looking at the world. And I gotta say, back then, people said, wow, you're being such a pioneer about this. I'm like, no, I just happen to be here, and I'm alone, and that's kind of, if you call that being a pioneer, maybe, but I was just happened to be there. And now it's just really wonderful to see so many people, like this, making the biggest movies and shows that everyone gets to see, and now no one thinks it's weird, and everyone is looking at films and looking at people like us leading these films as being completely normal. And I think that is truly inspiring.
Yeah, I feel like I felt the change even in school. Like when I was in school, it was just starting to get 50% non-male students, and now I think it's tipped and it's over 75%.
I think it's 75%.
Yeah, 75% non-male students in animation, and I think the internet really opened up the door for a lot of people like me to get access to old school Disney pencil tests and artists and books and just drawings and examples of things that were only accessible to a small group of people who knew a friend or who knew somebody who worked for Disney. But now I think with the internet it just exploded, and you just see so many more voices just in this industry, and it's the great equalizer, I think. So I just feel so excited to be in animation right now, and I also want to pay forward, all of the support and love that I've gotten throughout my career, and just want to make sure that okay, yes, the door is open for me, but I have to make sure that door stays open for the generation after me, and that I'm pulling people up with me at the same time, so that this isn't just a blip in history, that it's an ongoing trend, you know?
Yeah.
And just going off of that, that it isn't a blip in history. I think, when we talked about the last, movie with like an all Asian contemporary cast, when we talked about Joy Luck Club, and when that came out, when I was growing up in Malaysia, we thought, oh my God, this is going to change everything. All these amazing talent, like, in terms of writing, directing, acting, and we thought it would just usher in this whole new age, and that didn't happen. And so when we got, I think for all of us getting into the industry, nobody wakes up thinking like, I want to be a wave maker. We just want to do what we do. We want to, and just be on it with equal footing as everyone else. And I think growing up in Asia, you're used to seeing like in Hong Kong action in theater, in movies, all these stars, these actors, these talent of people who look like you, so you take it for granted. And it wasn't until I got here, and worked in the industry for about a decade where you realize like, oh, there are all these obstacles within and without. And the ones within are, as pernicious. And I think like organizations like CAPE has done a tremendous amount of work, because there's something with what we've realized, as a community, there's something about Asian American women particularly, about like underrepresenting and overperforming, feeling like your work just has to speak for you. But in entertainment particularly, you have to do a lot of self-advocacy. You have to like really be confident speaking for yourself, be comfortable getting batted down. And so there's this whole learning curve that's happened. And I think the great thing is with all these organizations and the awareness, and also just in all the projects that we're doing, normalizing just seeing our faces out there. When I was working in television for 16 years, I wrote for almost exclusively white casts and almost exclusively white male casts. And the feeling was I couldn't get a project, I couldn't get traction on a project if the cast didn't look that way. And what we've seen in the last 5-8 years is just like that could not be further from the truth. Like the world is absolutely ready for it. So the long way of answering questions, just like, I'm looking forward to the day where we're not going to be seen as wave makers, where we just all, have an equal footing about being able to do what we love to do creatively.
Yes.
Yeah. Amen. Totally. The term wave maker is so fun. I never thought of that before, but I totally agree with you. I mean, like for me, it's just doing what you're passionate about and then trying to spread the love and spread that joy and give people opportunities as much as you can. And, for me personally, I love kind of genre content like fantasy and sci-fi, and I just never saw Asians in them, and it was so annoying. And so I think I always wanted to create content like that and kind of, like have it integrated effortlessly so that it just sort of like reflects our world as it is. And I think we've seen strides in that actually really recently, where it's just sort of blending into the entertainment that we watch on a daily basis. So
yeah, I mean, I think it's so incredible that today we have so many Asian American leaders in position where they can help make choices that empower us and empower our communities, and deliver on giving filmmakers, Asian American filmmakers, an opportunity to tell authentic stories with people on screen that look like us. And it gives all of us, I think, an opportunity to really mentor the next generation. And I mean, look, we're sitting here and we get to talk on this panel. This never happened 10 years ago. CAPE, I mean, you mentioned CAPE. CAPE is just a huge force with bringing us together and giving us, a real, power to, more powerful together than apart. For me, when I grew up in Baltimore, Maryland, in the 70s, and there were not a lot of Asian faces on American TV or movies. My father's from Japan. I saw a lot of Japanese television, but I didn't understand what they were saying, frankly. And often the representation of Asians were not very positive. But today, it's very different. A lot because of you guys and many others, telling meaningful stories that empower our community versus perpetuate stereotype. So I thought for a minute we could talk about being in the driver's seat and what it's meant for you guys. And I thought maybe we'd start with you, Domee. Your film, your work has really, spoken to me personally. Sorry, and so many others. Your work is beautiful, compassionate, intelligent, embraces Chinese culture. Your short film, Bao, makes me hungry just thinking about it. Turning Red is layered with meaning, culture, and soul. Is there anything you can share that, any moment when you were making the film that you felt the weight of your decisions when it came to race and representation in your work? And did you feel supported?
Yeah. Oh, that's a big question. I definitely felt the weight and pressure of directing like a big tentpole movie for the studio, just in general. But I don't think it like hit me how important this film was until we started showing it to people in the studio. We have these things called brain trust screenings. So like throughout the course of a film's production, which is at least 4 years, we show it at least 8 times to different groups of people at the studio, and just like hearing some of the feedback and reactions of audience members like at the studio. Like these are just animation people, like, oh my gosh, this is so different and fresh, and like I've never seen anything like this. I was like, whoa, what? Like it shocked me because this is just my life and I'm just so saturated in it, and I just wanted to use this project as an opportunity just to share all the stuff I love and that I see every day, that I eat every day, the people that I hang out with and love, but it just didn't hit me that that is not a common thing that you see in Western media until we started getting that very positive, but very like surprising feedback. So that's when I knew that like, oh, this is something special. Yeah, and then I'm like, I can't screw up.
Yeah.
Phew, good.
I think for me, the thing that was really great on a show like Love, Death, and Robots, which is an anthology, you get the opportunity to work with many different directors. And one of the things that was really great about the show is I got to meet an amazing young director named Emily Dean, who is an Asian-Australian director.
I love her.
And so she did this short film, which was beautiful. It was so beautiful, and it was directly channeling what she wanted to do. And what was great was being able to give her this opportunity to show what she does, and also be able to give her the chance to tell a story that's not necessarily like, it's a science fiction story. It's not about ancient China, it's not about, pandas, it's not about anything that is limited to an Asian story. Mm-hmm. She could do whatever she wanted. And so when you're talking about paying it forward, I think being in the driver's seat is about being able to pay it forward. Mm-hmm. Give the next generation of Asian filmmakers the chance to do something that is exactly what they want without limits. And I think that's an amazing responsibility.
I think when I first started working on Raya for Disney, I'd never worked in animation before, and I parked my car at that big Disney animation studio and got into the elevator that takes you up, and into it came like 4 other like story artists, and the thing that blew my mind was like all 4 story artists were Asian females. I was like, in my whole career in Hollywood, I'd never been in an elevator with like 4 other Asian females doing anything. And so I was like, oh my God, like, so it was all there. And when I came on, I think in the beginning, the loose idea was like they had, Asian female dragon, and the directors had just taken a trip to Southeast Asia and were blown away. And by complete coincidence, I was the writer on it, and I'd grown up in Southeast Asia, and we're thinking like, are people going to know enough? And like Southeast Asia is like not a monolith. Are they going to know enough about it? But so many of the story artists were already people of that culture, who kind of understood it, who like understood it in their heart, not because they saw something fun about it on the Google. And so in terms of coming up with story, when you talk about being in the driver's seat, what I found was an interesting challenge for all of us was not coming up with a story that we thought mainstream America would like, or something that fit into the mold of like, this is what Disney has done before, and this is, our version of that, of just like to lead from joy. And so whether it was in the writing or the storyboard artists, finally being able to like put on boards things that they grew up with, things, stories that they heard. They didn't have to take their experiences and put it through this prism of like, okay, well, this is what the white Disney princess would want to say, how they want to act. Just being able to come from that place of joy and trust it and not second guess it like, well, it's different, or how are people going to react to it? Just come purely from a place of like, I find this transcendent and exuberant, and having faith that other people will too. And it's, and sometimes it's a hard leap to take for us because the systems aren't used to seeing our stories. Like, we grew up with their stories, they didn't grow up with ours. So sometimes it's a little bit more of a barrier in terms of trying to sell your idea. But, it's still having the faith that, this is going to clap, this is going to blow the roof off the place. Just like, let me bring you on this journey.
Yeah.
Driver's seat. I mean, it's really a privilege, I think, to be, as you know, at a studio on the buying side where you can create so much impact and sort of open the door for a lot of people. And I think, particularly at Netflix, we have such a diversity of content. We have so many opportunities. And as a content executive, I'm there at the beginning looking for material, looking for talent, all the way to the end when we launch, a new title. And I think uniquely it allows me to, have an influence at every single stage, and therefore an opportunity to hire more or, to sort of make sure there's an authentic lens to the story being told, to challenge the creators to do so as well, to try and set people up for success. Because I think it's not only the hiring someone, but you really want to set them up for success. And it's, working with talented, incredible people like yourselves that are showing so many dimensions to what it is to be Asian as well, like hilarity, badassery, fabulousness. It's everything. And I think, I feel a great deal of responsibility, especially in animation with our audience, but also just, a privilege to be able to make an impact.
It's animation so interesting because we all have at our fingertips control over every aspect. Every single detail is drawn, and all of those nuances to culture are seeded in from the concept to the pencil or the pen going on the Wacom tablet. It's so important for people from to bring their own cultural experience to everything we make, right? I guess I have one last question for you guys. And you guys should also chime in if you've been inspired during this panel, if you have anything that you want to kind of throw in there as well, please do. But what is your hope and vision for Asian American women in animation for the future?
I got one, because I think there's been a lot of progress made on getting those 75% of Asian students that want to get into the business. They're getting their first job. I would love to see them get their second job. Because the first job, honestly, the first job anyone ever gets, no matter who you are a complete disaster. Because you don't know anything on your first job. On your first job, you survive. On your second job, you learn to become what you're really meant to be. You become good at what you're meant to be. You become indispensable. And the second job is what leads these young women to become supervisors, directors, writers, showrunners. That's the second job, hopefully. So I would love to see a lot of effort, not just getting them in the door, but to encourage them to keep going into those second jobs with greater responsibility where they can really show what they can do and become literally indispensable. And then you'll see them rise to this new crop of leadership.
Yeah, like just to add to that, I'd love to see studios also provide that support for like these new Asian voices as well. I feel like, and I see this sometimes where like a studio will invest in like new voices, but then they're kind of just throwing them into the deep end and they're like, here you go, good luck. But you're not equipping them with the resources or connections or support or confidence of their like white male peers who have accumulated like a support system. So I feel like I would love to see that. Like, I feel like that's really important too. It's not just giving the opportunity, but it's also like growing it as well.
Yeah. I mean, it's a huge part of the mentorship, right? Yeah. Is, you open the door to mentorship and then you have to follow up, right? And check in and continue that relationship. Mm-hmm. So
I love that you brought up like the second, third, fourth, and also like the top jobs. Because we exist in that intersection between, being Asian and being women. And when they do study, and it's not exclusive to animation, it's across all sectors. But generally studies show that, men will put themselves up for jobs that they are grossly underqualified for. And women, just don't put themselves up. If they think there's one checkbox that they don't check, then they don't put themselves up for it. And we saw it even at Disney. There would be openings. And I had a producer, Osnat Shura, who was fantastic, female producer, who would seek out women and basically have to give them pep talks of just like, you can do this and you can step up and you can absolutely fulfill this role. And a lot of these women would not have stepped into that role had it not been for that strong proponent, for that strong voice, because there's a whole, and just to talk the real of it all, sometimes there's this feeling of, well, these women were properly motivated, they just kind of go for it. But we're in these systems that are not necessarily built for us. When you talk about mentorship, we don't necessarily have those elders that look like us, that empathize with us, that can speak to our experience. And so if you don't have any of that, if you don't have like the senior director or like a showrunner who looks at you and says like, I see myself in that young Asian girl, like that, I think for us coming out, a lot of us didn't have that. So, the women have been doing it for ourselves. We have been, supporting each other and being proponents of each other. Would love to see that more awareness of that, within the companies, within studios, and to help put that system in place if there isn't one there already organically.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like that. I want to see a bunch of us putting ourselves up for jobs we're grossly unqualified for. We're really
airline pilot for me.
No, I agreed. Like numbers, impact, like positions of power, because I think that is a really big kind of difference to acknowledge, is that there might be numbers at more junior levels, but at those top, most impactful levels, I think you still see the difference, So really having powerful positions, repeat positions, and touching sort of every type of entertainment, every type of story, so that we see it reflected in the stories too.
Yeah. So I think part of the program is to open it up to the floor and engage with you guys and answer questions that you might have for this incredible panel. And so, anyone have a question? Oh, there's one right there.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for this panel. It's been very refreshing and insightful. I'm Monica Rodriguez. I'm actually a PA at Nickelodeon, and I'm a volunteer today. I guess my question is for anyone who would like to answer. If you were to talk to your 20, 21-year-old self now, what would you tell yourself from the past?
Have more fun. It's gonna be okay.
Yeah. I mean, I would definitely say that things change, and expect them to change, and to change for the better, and to believe in yourself and go for it, and find your people.
Yeah, like don't be so hard on yourself. Chill out, smoke some weed.
I mean, it is legal now.
Yeah.
This is just echoing all of that, but really, especially in entertainment, you feel like there are all these benchmarks everybody else hits in their 20s. You're like, oh my God, I'm just over here, I'm struggling. My mother's on the phone with me every week going like, you don't get vacation pay? Like, it's a whole thing. And we're so like youth oriented, but the truth is it is a marathon. It's not a sprint. And, where people have ended up, 20, 30 years later was not an indication of where they were when in their 20s. So like, smoke some weed, have some fun, just believe in your creative vision and go for it.
I mean, I can't top that. Amen. Plus one.
Drugs.
And also do a lot of core exercises and shoulder work because your posture is going to do this in animation.
True.
Yeah, a lot of stretches.
Do your
A lot of
stretches. Don't get carpal tunnel. Yeah, it's real.
So, any other hands up? I see a hand. Wait, right here.
Thank you. With the theme of Asian women empowered, maybe I can just ask, for again, anyone who would like to answer, what role did mentorship play in your growth? If there is a mentor that you'd like to call out, or what they have done for you to help you get to where you are, or any sort of inspiration along that mentorship theme?
Yeah, I feel like for me, mentorship was huge. Pete Docter, the director of Inside Out, and my first boss when I first worked at Pixar, I was a storyboard artist at the time. Like, he just created such an open environment in the story room that let anyone like voice their opinion or ideas without being afraid of like repercussions. Like, he won't take your idea, like, but he'll like explain why, and he was just very communicative and supportive, and he left himself open to being like a resource too for like other artists as well. Like, he'll always say hi to you in the hallway, and it just made me comfortable enough to like one day like ask him, hey, like, I'm working on this short film that I've just been like doing on the side for fun. It's called Bao. It's like a little dumpling fairy tale. Could I pitch it to you just to get your take on it, just to get your like notes or thoughts? And he was like, yes, of course. And I pitched it to him, and he was so excited about it. And I think it was through that excitement and through like seeing his positive response that really gave me like confidence and like in finding my own voice early on in my career. And I think that's huge, like having a mentor or like someone that you respect so much like see you and say that like you have a story that's worth telling. I think that was huge for me and like for my confidence, and also that he was into just this weird idea of this old Chinese lady who eats her baby dumpling boy, and he was like, great, yes, Pixar should make that. So
I think mentorship is probably one of the most important things to have, because work is hard. Directing is hard. Any sort of job in this business is hard. You need somebody who's going to be able to watch your back, who's going to be able to tell you you're not crazy, and you can trust, and tell them all the things that you're worried about failing doing. And that mentor is going to tell you it's okay, you're going to be all right, this is a way to do it, this is how I did it, and they sort of soften the path in front of you. I've had a whole string of mentors. Every single project I've had the work therapist come in. I mean, it's not a nice therapist, they're tough therapists, but you go to them and say, I have this problem, and they tell you, try this, try that, and they knock you about the head and send you on your way. I've had Catherine Winder, I've had Melissa Cobb, I've had my sisters and my mom, I've had on the show that I'm on right now, Tim Miller. You know, I go up to him and I say, I don't like this design, what do I do? And the budget does not have this money in it. And he says, just do it. No one's going to like it if it's under budget and bad. Everyone's going to like it if it's over budget and great. Just do it. And so if someone who's been there is able to tell you reassurance, it'll allow you to survive and keep going and learn and hopefully turn around and mentor someone else.
It was spotty for me in the beginning. We touched on it a little earlier. There were not a lot of Asian female senior showrunner level type people in Hollywood, and it's a good and bad thing. First, it fills you with rage, and then you use that rage to then go kick ass. But I did definitely have mentors later on in my career, and then I realized everything I'd missed out on. And so again, with organizations, whether it's Gold House and CAPE, people, if you can't find one in your line of work, in your immediate work environment, I would highly encourage you to seek it out. Because I think later on in my career, whether it was writing at a certain level, directing, I was friends with John Chu, and you have to put your, there are no good big girl schools for directing. You kind of have to put together your own program yourself. But my friends and John Chu, who would get on the phone with me or get on a Zoom with me and really coach me through certain things, because you don't know what you don't know. And so, having that mentor is invaluable.
Well, first, I have to give Jen a shout out because she is acting as a mentor on a project we're working on to 3 new filmmakers. And so, you really are showing through action all the time, and such a generous mentor to so many. For me, I was very much inspired by a former Netflix executive, Nikita Maddox, shout out. Fantastic, but she just was so good at both amplifying, things that I was kind of like, well, what about this? Or when I was trying to excuse myself from something or not fight for something, she'd be like, Janet. And I just was like, okay, but having someone kick you in the butt like that and really fight for yourself, I think really is critical. And, especially because of how we're brought up culturally, and sort of, we don't want to take up space, and we don't want to speak loud, to have someone be like, no, do that, and don't be apologetic, I think is invaluable.
I'll just add that, what's interesting about animation is that it takes a really long time to make. And you're often with a group of people for 3, 4, 5 years. And the culture of animation is one of a family. And there's so much mentorship that goes, or relationship building, bonding, communication, just about your growth and about your artistic growth and about your artistic collaborations. I mean, it is something that's very special to animation, I think, that you don't find in live action as much, because live action takes a shorter time, most of the time. And so, I just thought I'd point that out. But
That's true.
I don't know where we are with time, guys. If we have time for another question, or... we have one more. Okay.
Hi. Hi, I'm Yasna. I'm a film composer, but I kind of wanted to ask, so this is kind of also on top of mentorship, but when you are speaking, when you are in the creation process, how do you navigate taking feedback, especially when you're balancing it between industry heads who just may not have ever had that experience or understand what the point of the story is just because they didn't grow up with it, versus also kind of taking in insight from other people who have, who may not be in the industry, but yeah, so I'd love to kind of learn a little bit more about your experiences.
I think the number one thing about taking feedback is you have to understand what is the note behind the note. It's not necessarily what they're asking, it's why they're asking it. You're coming from a place where you probably know more about what you're particularly doing than whoever is giving you that note, often. And so you have to figure out, why is this person bothered by this thing? Why are they giving me this feedback? And then figure out how to fix it. They may not be able to tell you how to fix it, but you just have to understand that note was made for a reason. You should address it, but not necessarily in the way that they're suggesting. So, don't chase what they're saying, chase why they're saying it.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Yeah, at Pixar, we always talk about look at the spirit of the note. Don't look at the note itself, because the notes will just keep coming no matter what, and they'll keep coming for those 4 or 5 years. It'll keep coming when the film's due. Okay, we have to lock everything down, but you're getting last minute notes, and I think it's challenging. It's you have to figure out what hill you want to die on, and what things that you're willing to compromise and collaborate with the studio on, because at the end of the day, you want your film to be made. Like, you want your project to be supported and funded and go out there and be shared with everybody. So that's just something that you kind of have to figure out as you work on it. But also, for me, I always look back to what was that initial spark that got me excited about this project, this story, this idea, and never lose sight of that North Star. Everything else is malleable. Everything else is just a way to get to that goal. But just remembering back to that very, very first thing that you wrote or drew or composed or anything, and then try to keep that in mind as you go through the gauntlet, I think.
Yeah.
I think mine is more specifically for writing, but I'm so glad you talked about you're holding on to that original spark, because sometimes depending on an animation, it might take 4 or 5 years on a project. You might be in development getting 20, 30 rounds of notes sometimes. And there's this thing that happens with a death of 1,000 cuts where you're making all these tiny little adjustments. It doesn't feel like, oh, it's just this one line, it's just this one thing. It's not really going to affect it. But the tonnage of it sometimes has a flattening effect. And, and I remember it was a big learning curve for me, because early on when I would take all these notes and you get patted on the head and you're like, I did a great job. And then at the end of it, you're looking at your project separate from what your bosses tell you, and you're like, this is not good. And so you are, at the end of the day, it's not about pleasing, a ton of other people. It's great it's great to get feedback. It's great to get that, but also having total faith that what you are doing is the best possible version of it. So even if you have to take 1,000 notes, making sure, as was said before, they may not know the way to fix it, and whatever you do to fix it should plus your project, not minus it.
Yeah, and I think pull as many people as you can in, because you'll start to feel those themes, and then you'll start to get at what is that bigger note, because it's absolutely true that you're going to get a bunch of notes that probably don't make sense or are misaligned, but they're going to be scratching at the same things. And I think as long as you can retain the vision that you have, but be open to these other possibilities and to hear people, I think that's where you get to the most creatively excellent point.
Find your people. Find your people to bounce off ideas in a sacred place too. It's so important to have that trust, the brain trust that you were talking about at Pixar.
Yeah. And then making sure that those people aren't just yes men. They'll give you that real feedback. They know you, they know the goal that you want to achieve, and they'll be real with you when you need them to be. So, yeah.
So, I think we're out of time, right? Where is Noriko? Okay.
Yes.
Thank you, everyone.